Let's talk about league football in Nigeria and how we can develop it. We went on that break and then someone walked into the studio. We're now being joined by Paul Jones. He is the founder of Sandlanders Football. Now, what is it all about? They promote supporter ownership. They promote the model, supporter ownership. What's it about? You as a fan, you support Aimba, you support Nasarawa, you support Shooting Stars. You make so much noise about Aqua United. How can you be part of the club? That way, we can develop football in Nigeria. Let's talk about supporter ownership model in football as Paul Jones joins us now. Paul, good to have you on the show, all the way from the UK.
Morning, Austin. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's right. Supporter ownership model, what is it about?
It's about engaging football clubs, engaging their supporters and getting them actually involved in the running and the management of the clubs, having a sense of ownership and actually being able to contribute to the clubs. It's something which is very big in Europe and actually across Africa as well. So in North Africa, East Africa, a lot of the clubs are actually associations, so owned by their supporters. I know in Nigeria, recently a lot of the Premier League clubs have been owned by the states.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of potential here, given that the state governments at the moment don't always have the resources they would like to commit to the clubs to be able to diversify the revenue streams a bit and introduce the supporters more into the financing of the club's operations.
So tell me, I know you guys have done some work in the past with stationary stores.
Yes.
How did that go?
It's going very well. So we started this around 12 months ago. We've been working with the supporters throughout that period, sensitising everyone, speaking to the supporters, getting their views on how they would like to be involved in the club. We've spoken a lot with the club's chairman and management, so everybody's on the same page. We're working towards the supporters trust, as it's going to be called, taking a share of ownership in the club.
Paul, I'll just cut you briefly. We saw the people on the streets, the support. This is stationary stores back in the days, and I can still see that flag of the supporters club. How can you speak to the guys on the streets that have so much passion for a particular club to be part of the team, invest in it, and promote the total well-being of the club?
Yeah, that's very important. As you say, you look at these pictures and it's incredible to see and I know the love that people still have for the club in Lagos today. So for us, it's very important to speak to as many of the supporters as possible. We have a Facebook page now. We're engaging with a lot of fans. That's been very popular through that medium. And we want people to come and speak to us, and we want to give them an opportunity to become more involved in the club. And what we do is to provide the correct structures to enable that to happen. So we work with lawyers, and we set up a cooperative structure in Nigeria. Supporters will then sign up to the cooperative. They'll be issued with a membership card, and then the trust in turn will take a share of ownership in the club. And that way the supporters will own the club.
Yeah. Okay. You talked about, we know that football in Nigeria, talking about clubs in Nigeria owned by state governments and all that. Now, how do you intend to actually involve, the supporters directly? Have you spoken with some of other clubs apart from stationary stores?
We've spoken with a few clubs, yes, and so we've spoken a lot with the LMC and with several clubs over the last year. And we've had some positive reactions as well. So I think the clubs, it will take time to explain and to fully understand how the process works. Okay. But we always provide examples from other places. So in Europe, for instance, clubs like Barcelona and Real Madrid, most people don't know it, but they're actually member-owned clubs.
Surely. And even Portsmouth.
Are they buying into some of the clubs and of course LMC that you spoke with?
Yes, they are. And so I think the clubs see the potential. I think they realise there's difficulties at the moment in terms of raising revenue. And if you look at most football clubs, they usually have 3 revenue streams, which are split between broadcasting revenue, then gate receipts, which is money supporters actually pay at the game, and then other commercial revenue. And in Nigeria, too often, the clubs have been dependent just on one revenue stream, which is
government.
Yeah, it's government funding. And so I think that the danger is that if you take that away, then the clubs are left with nothing. Yeah. And then the supporters are left with nothing. So if you involve the supporters from the beginning, give them an opportunity to voice their interests, then it's a great position for them to be in.
Yeah, surely. And Paul, apart from inclusiveness, what are the benefits can this kind of ownership model actually bring to the fans?
Sure. So it certainly gives them a level, as you say, of inclusiveness and involvement. There are tangible benefits attached too. So in other countries, you have systems where the cooperative, the supporters trust, will work with insurance companies and banks to provide benefits to members. And the idea is that if you get so many people together, so in Barcelona, Bayern Munich, they have over 180,000 members. So these are very big organisations. I think in Nigeria, you have the same potential to get the same numbers of supporters. And that will enable you then to work with corporate groups to provide various benefits for the supporters through the sponsorships. Because I think once corporates see that the supporters are properly involved and there's a very clear legal structure and there's transparency and accountability, then that will give corporates confidence to invest.
Okay, yeah, obviously this kind of method as well to funding is going to be very important.
That's
so,
right.
like, what are the funding options for this kind of ownership model where, apart from membership and subscription, which you spoke about earlier, what are the other options that we have?
Yeah, so I think the subscription is that's the basis for the supporters' involvement. So you would have every member paying a few thousand naira per year perhaps, and then that gets collectively pooled into a pot. The money can then be allocated to a specific infrastructure project. So the supporters can get together and say, we're going to build this training facility. This is the target. We want to get 10,000 members registered, and then everyone contributes, and then you develop the facility. That type of engagement, you then use that to speak to corporate groups and to bring additional revenue in. And what we've seen in other countries is that once you involve the supporters in this way, the corporates come involved much more quickly, because they see that there's actual engagement and passion from the supporters groups, because a sponsor wants to know that they're reaching people and touching people, and this is a very clear way of doing that.
Very important, because if I have a membership card and I have so much passion following my club, I won't have any problem putting money into it. Let's talk about some of the teams in Africa that are already making use of the supporter ownership model.
Yes, as I mentioned, particularly in North Africa, it's very, very popular. And as you might know, that the sports industry in general across North Africa is well developed.
Yes.
So Zamalek in Egypt, for instance, has 54,000 registered members.
Wow.
You look at clubs in Tunisia, Esperance, CSS Sfaxien. Going back to Egypt, Al Ahly is a huge one. Wydad Casablanca in Morocco. So all of these clubs between them have hundreds of thousands of registered members. And then if you look at their Facebook pages, they have millions of people liking the page. And a club like Zamalek, for instance, they've developed a leisure resort for their members. So they use the members' contributions constructively and actually develop things that people can use.
Okay, now how can Nigerian supporters actually get involved in it? Like ordinary man on the street, he wants to have maybe a stake at AIM or something like that. So how will he start?
Yes, and so we're starting with the stationery stores project, and so in the next couple of months there's going to be some media announcements very publicly about where people can go to actually register for their share. And so the way it will work is people can approach us online, or they can actually go to individual offices, sign up for their membership cards. We're going to be speaking to mobile companies and banks to find out ways of distributing memberships so people can actually access them very easily. But we'll be using stores as the pilot project, and then we hope that other clubs will see the benefits and follow on as well.
Okay, but those stations, we don't have them yet. I mean, where they can actually go. No, we don't have them. Okay, he's going to set it up.
Not yet, Cecilia, but we'll keep you updated. So what we plan to do is in the next month or two, we'll give you some clear dates, and then we'll have a launch when everybody's made aware and people can go and start to register.
Okay, now what actually, prompted you to come to Nigeria to want to do this?
I've worked in African football for the last 10 years, and I'd always seen that Nigeria had a huge potential. So we've worked in other countries like Ghana and Tunisia. But speaking actually with some of I met a couple of members of the LMC about 2 years ago, and I understand that they've already talked about community ownership in Nigerian football. And the more we looked into this, I think the more we realised there was actually an appetite, and people wanted to get involved in clubs here, and also that there was a big opportunity in terms of plugging the funding gap that might be left if the governments aren't able to commit for the longer term to the clubs, and so it has all of the conditions in place to be a brilliant place for supporter ownership.
Okay, yeah. The advantages of this particular kind of ownership. What What, like, for example, you have the private ownership model. You've got the corporate entity ownership model. What advantages does this fan ownership model have over these other ones?
I think the primary one is that it protects the club, and so if you have a private owner or a company backing the club, if for whatever reason the private owner runs out of money or decides he doesn't want to involve himself, or the corporate loses its market share, then the supporters will always be there. And generally when clubs have collapsed in the past, it's the supporters who lose out. Yes. So if you have a club which has tens of thousands of supporters and that club goes bankrupt, then it's the supporters who miss out. So this way you're actually generating a sustainable revenue stream and enabling the supporters to actually be there all the time. So you're not dependent on one man or one institution, it's the community together.
Awesome. Can you just tell us a bit about Portsmouth? Recently they went into administration.
Right.
Yes.
The fans actually came to the rescue. Can you tell us a bit about that situation?
Sure, and that's a great story as well.
Right.
So there are several examples in the UK, Portsmouth being probably the biggest, where, as you say, clubs got into administration, then the supporters started organising themselves, started off with small meetings, then built things up. They now have thousands of registered members. They recently raised £250,000 online through an online crowdfunding platform to develop a new training facility, so some new training pitches.
Awesome.
So it's a great story, and now you see the Portsmouth, they're in Division League 2 in the UK.
They're coming up again.
Exactly.
And
so
they've got the stadium back as well.
Yes, they do, and so everything is protected for the community as well. So in the UK now we have a system where stadiums can be protected for community interest, so that an owner can't come and buy a club, then sell the stadium and then leave the supporters with nothing. Everything is protected for the community's interest.
Yeah, do you think Nigerian Premier League, I mean, some of the things you talked about, supporters ownership, community ownership, do we have that potential to actually achieve that?
Yes, I really think you do, and I think it will take some time, it will take time to put the correct structures in place, but in terms of the raw materials, the passion, the commitment for football here, and I think that it's a very, very exciting prospect.
Paul, I must say thank you so much for coming around to talk about the supporter ownership model, and we believe someday it will work in Nigeria. Right now, I feel, I should just get up and start supporting one club. It's my own little way.
You'll be one of the first people to get a membership.
You're a fan of shooting stars.
That's right.
No. Yeah, you're a fan of shooting stationary stars.
No, why are you talking like this? Aqua United, come on.
I just wanted to know, because at the moment, the project is about stationary stars.
Right now, I'm in Lagos.
Yeah,
right?
that's
so
right.
stars back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we get more people talking about their clubs and wanting to hear this type of thing, then we can encourage more clubs to start issuing cards and get people registered.
Okay, that's all we'll do. I think we'll start with some of the big clubs. Enyimba, who won the Champions League back-to-back. And of course, there's actually no structure or anything to actually portray to say, okay, we are former champions of the continent. It's not just there at all. Maybe with something like Bezame, with supporters, community ownership and all that, definitely we can have, I mean, maybe some of the clubs even having their own stadium, you know, like you talked about facilities and all. Because right now in Nigeria, all the facilities where they play football is owned by the state.
That's right.
That's because it's a government ownership model, like about 16 clubs, apart from MFM.
Is actually building one.
We have about 4 that are not government-owned
stadium.
You know, MFM can really benefit from this.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's owned by a church. Just imagine every church member sign up to
membership card.
Wow.
Exactly. I'm sure the attendances, congregations would grow if you...
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Paul, for coming around.
Thank you very much.
That's what it is, supporter ownership model in football being discussed right here on Sports This Morning. And there's so much to learn from that.